Welcome to the Evolving Solutions Coffee Talk, AI Accelerated Cybersecurity. Now I'm going to turn the program over to Michael Downs, Chief Technology Officer at Evolving Solutions.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining the Coffee Talk today. As Kelly said, I'm Michael Downs. I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at Evolving Solutions. I am extremely excited about today's Coffee Talk. We're having a really good conversation around AI and security, and not just how you secure AI, but what AI is doing to security. So I think I'm really excited to have a couple of folks with me who are very deep on this. I've spent a lot of time touching it, playing it, talking to clients about it, understanding, thinking deeply about how this world works. So I've got Russ Staiger and Nic Boet joining me. Russ, you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Sure. Thank you, Michael. My name is Russ Staiger. I am the Principal Security Solutions Architect for Evolving Solutions. Been with the organization for about a year and a half, almost a year and 3/4. Really focused on security operations, growing the practice, data, identity, network, kind of across the entire picture. So thanks for having me here.
Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. Nic, you want to do an intro quick?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Nic Boet, another solution architect here at Evolving Solutions. I'm focused on the security practice. I've been here for about going on 3 years. I came from the client side. I have a pretty broad background in network and network security.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining, and I'm looking forward to get into our topic today. But before we do, we're gonna have the obligatory coffee chat today. Thank you all for joining for our coffee talk today. You'll be receiving, if you joined the webinar today, you'll be getting an Evolving Solutions Yeti mug or thermos, as well as a Starbucks gift card to enjoy your own coffee. Today, I'm actually drinking some coffee from a roaster in St. Paul. Both Nic and Russ are on the east side of the city, so I decided to wander into St. Paul to get some coffee. But there's a coffee roaster called Tact that coffee, as you probably know, is full of volatile organic compounds, which is something you don't want in your paint, but you do want in your coffee. It has lots of flavor, aromas, and so on. And so are flowers. So that's one of the things that they latched on to, was a perspective that has talking about the volatile organic compounds in both coffee and in flowers. So kind of a cool little roaster. I would encourage you to check it out. They're over in the St. Anthony neighborhood. And as always, if you choose to have a meeting with Nic or Russ or any of the folks on our security team, be very happy to send you a bag of Tact coffee or anything else you might like as far as that goes, because the other two folks on this phone have got different perspectives on coffee. Nic, what was it that you told me you were trying to get? Was a Monster sponsorship?
Yeah, I got addicted to Monster Energy coffee some years ago, and I drank enough of it where when I was on my trip, I could have put a sticker on my truck to advertise for them while I'm drinking it down the road. So it's more energy than coffee, but yes.
I love it. And Russ, you are deep in the geek side of coffee alternative.
I am. I'm guilty. I drink the Rise mushroom coffee twice a day. Kind of, you could set your watch by it.
Okay.
It started in February. I just saw the ad and I thought, I'll try it. You know, this adaptogenic mushroom thing, and honestly, it tastes pretty good. So I kind of it got me.
Nice. I'll have to try it. So as your bonus for today, if you have a conversation with Nic or Russ, will also give you the option of getting a little bit of Monster Java, or we'll send you some Rise. So happy to do that if you're willing to have a conversation with us. So I'm going to jump into this right away. Maybe I'm going to ask you to start off, Russ, a little bit with, I feel like there's sort of two worlds in this. There's the AI and the way we talked about security and AI up until Mythos was released, and how we've talked about it since. And certainly it wasn't a total binary switch. There were certainly some considerations before Mythos was released that were similar, but it was just amplified with Mythos. Could you maybe talk a little bit about sort of the world of security and AI up to the time that Mythos rolled in, and what our worries were at that point?
Yeah, like anything else in security at this point, it is a narrative of integration integrity. So prior to this Mythos era, AI security really required that it was integrated to a human story, that it was assistive, it was a tool of enormous power, but it itself was not intuitive. It didn't have ability to create directives or understand pathing. So that's why we saw things like, oh, AI enhanced phishing was, a huge problem. We were seeing improvements in grammar, more convincing language, but we couldn't go say have an agent that would say, I understand that there's an opportunity to go after a specific target, and I'm going to create an entire campaign and do all of those other things as well. So it's really before is we're talking about the AI landscape as very bespoke tools that handled narrow avenues of different things we needed to do inside that hacking game. But then in the bigger picture, we would think of this post-Mythos world, we are talking about fully autonomous platforms that are capable of, you quite literally can explain to them what you want from a specific target, and they will take actions, necessary all the way up through the planning and execution, again, autonomously.
Yeah. So maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit. So what really changed with the Mythos when Mythos was released? It's obviously the autonomous piece, but there are also some other things that really came to the fore.
Yeah, there were issues like pre-Mythos, it was, it was code generation for malware. It was the social engineering capacities, right? So we had lots of organizations that were struggling to kind of keep up with attackers getting these really, creative use cases. Today, it's, the attackers are essentially they're given capability to say, hey, we understand the IP block of a specific organization, or we would like even to have that discovered. We'd like to have that IP block nmapped or some glorified nmap done across that. Then we would like you to iterate on the findings inside that nmap scan, create specific exploits for what we know about those underlying system components. Once those are executed, then if that creates some hole or distraction that gets some capability for a foothold, then guess what? We take that, we look at what we can see and amplify from there laterally, or we're pen testing applications that live in that same infrastructure at the same time, doing blended attacks that come in from two different angles and confuse defensive systems, things like WAFs, load balancers, and create these opportunities to have these technologies hit at speed and scales that humans simply cannot generate on their own. So we find, that this becomes a force multiplier almost logarithmically as the imagination wanders into just being able to create the correct prompt, right? Asking of it a more elaborate attack scenario.
Yeah, and that feels particularly dangerous to me in light of what we've seen with other AI in other areas, which is one of the best ways to get a good response out of AI is to get AI to generate the prompt that you ought to give to AI for you.
Exactly.
And to be able to sort of do that same kind of chain when you're talking about trying to feed a corporate security or a cybersecurity makes that even more malicious, clearly.
Yep.
Nic, I know you have a little bit, sort of a deeper focus also on application security. And we talked a little bit about, if we were prepping for this, around 0 days. And we've seen a whole bunch of press releases about all the vulnerabilities that were found in Firefox and other things like that, in spite of the fact that Firefox is a great example of an open source code base that people have been looking at literally for decades, that they all were able to find things there that existed there. Could you maybe talk a little bit about sort of how that's changed the way that people think about code and maybe some underlying even operating systems and capabilities?
Sure. So it's kind of like when you're working on a project with AI, you're tailoring it to grab a specific model tailored to your use case. So the newer models coming out now, they're hyper tuned for cybersecurity, kind of vulnerability and threat discovery and exploitation, right? So while you can apply for exceptions in some of the current models, some folks have that today. I'm one of them. You can do some of that exploratory today, but the newer models are hyper tuned to try to help uncover, more of the 0-day code-based findings. So a lot of the large players in the world, like the top OEMs and some large open source projects that have early access to the newer models, are running it against their code base. And that's what's kind of generating this surge of new patches and vulnerabilities, right? Like we're accelerating our discovery across the code to find potential exploits in those user inputs and the way the applications behave. And it's just really, it's no different than what we do in the last 20 years, right? We look at the code and we try to find faults in it. It's just AI can do it very quickly. And these models are getting very good at trying to figure out where the most prone part of the code is to get that patched.
Sure. And so how has that changed the way that organizations are looking at patching or looking at vulnerability management?
Yeah, so some of the challenges, right, is the speed to get it applied or the speed to discovery. So a lot of places are looking at ways to accelerate their VTM program to cover their detections quicker, right? Try to get more feeds in from the tooling and try to make decisions to say, what is my highest risk point and trying to get that patched, right? You definitely are going to have to adapt patching cycles if you don't have it today, right? Like that is still a thing you'll have to do from a best practice. There'll be a surge probably the next year or two, right, of seeing a lot more patches need to be rolled out to your environment. But I think with the right like cyber threat program, you can help identify which area to target first in your organization. There's certainly layers to that strategy, right, to try to figure out where to focus on. It doesn't quite go away. It just kind of accelerates the depth of it, right, to keep you protected. So your neighbor, maybe your neighbor gets attacked first versus your company, right? Like you want to be, you don't want to be that weakest link out there, right?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So sort of related to that, maybe I'll ask you, Russ, what do you see as changes to software development going forward? In other words, that it almost feels like Nic made a great point of maybe the next year, 2 years, we're going to see a acceleration of patches and so on. Are we going to be able to take advantage of this to reduce the vulnerability of the code base in general as code generated?
Yeah, great question. It's always easier to find the problems than it is to fix them sort of at scale proactively, right? And that's been sort of the challenge for the industry for a very long time. The shift left mentality has relied on catching things earlier in the code production cycle to move that accountability earlier in the chain down to the developer rather than see it obviously reach production. Yep. In this landscape, right, so we have two problems. One is, to what degree can the organizations that produce code have the same power to see that kind of exploitation of that code in order to see vulnerability in their code at the depth that Mythos makes possible. Whereas if you're a large enough organization, or you're just out in the world in general, doesn't even have to be a big place, Mythos could be targeted against you, and somebody else could just go do that discovery against your existing public or published code, right? So the challenge becomes, how do we tease that out of our out of our information today, out of the code that we produce? There are, and Nic and I have seen a lot of this. There are a lot of tools out there that can help do the hygienic wash of making sure your code is in a good place. There's a ton of focus on making sure that the public repos and that the third-party code that is shared throughout literally every website in the world or every web application in the world gets some sanity passed around it. But what we see is really one of the challenges, not necessarily that the code itself can be vulnerable. It's that because of this third-party function of it, and that Mythos can be used to target those third-party code providers, and do things like breach those organizations and then insert additionally malicious code into the contributive code that becomes part of the presentation state of these applications or these published websites, if you will. We find that it's not just about writing good code, it's about what degree of curation of the code that you source from anywhere. What capability do you have to know that? And so that is expanding quickly. And then we also see, and we see this in organizations that we work with, just lots of really challenging hygiene around the way that those environments where the code is actually, the repos where they hold it, how it's actually rendered, using a single login for a whole team or things like that. There are additional pieces to this that will, with the focus that Mythos can provide as a, how many ways are you soft, that we will see that these small gaps or these things that are just, conveniences of a purpose. We say that security is rarely convenient, convenience is rarely secure. If your whole team is using the same login, that will be uncovered. So as Mythos finds all of these kinds of advantages, right, like it will tighten up many aspects of code development, not just the actual code itself, but the coding culture around it. I think that the change we will see in the coding culture between where we are today and let's say 18 to 24 months from now could be dramatic, specifically just around hygiene and how those environments are managed.
Yeah, I'm not going to go way off script, but I just throw a provocative question out there we don't need to answer, which is what's that do to risk, right? Who picks up the liability with the code base that you're inheriting is insecure, and it shows up in your code base. Is your code base insecure? How do you what's the organization that's going to have to deal with the liability that goes with that? And I think history has told us it's the organization using the third-party tool, not the not the third-party tool provider. So it just accelerates that potential threat landscape or risk landscape for those who are developing code for public consumption. So you've touched on this a little bit. What are one or two other things that you would suggest organizations do in sort of this post-Mythos world that maybe is different than what they've done in order to be able to adapt to this? And maybe I'll start with you, Nic.
Sure. Yeah. So we've been kind of advocating to have good security practices start from like the design phase of software, right? So I think what you'll start to see more is trying to not quite fold in, but maybe expand more of the security mindsets into the developer land spaces of the organizations where it's more security first at that. Before you even write the code, right, is like, am I doing this securely and kind of checking that whole ecosystem, right? It's historically has been kind of an after fact, right? Some orgs have been proactive over the years in looking at it before it's deployed versus after the app's deployed, right? So security should be done definitely before the application hits production, either code review or pipeline governance, as Russ was talking about, of just making sure all the credentials are, two-factored and there's a login and audit in place as to who is doing what when in the environment before, that code gets compiled or hits the production servers. So just looking at it more holistically is going to be your best defense on that.
Yeah. So Russ, you want to add to that maybe a little bit? And maybe the other piece to this as a nuance is we have enterprises that are probably joining us, and certainly enterprises we work with that don't develop a lot of their own code, but still have some risk from Mythos. Maybe highlight some of what they might be able to do as well as some other perspectives.
Well, I think from big, like the big marquee statements on this is that, in a lot of ways, we're moving from, and this isn't a code specific thing, but that we're moving really we're being forced as an industry to go from perimeter defense to immune system.
Sure.
Like there's no longer the case that we are just simply ring fencing our environments with, really good filtration. It comes down to us, like as it is in zero trust, right? Like we assume breach, right? In the ability to do that immune system concept, it comes down to rapid adaptability, which is automation is no longer optional. Like that will be the big theme, because that is what you're really contending with. Mythos is exceptional automation, right? The UK's AI security initiative, saw it conduct a completely successful 32-step attack, right? On its own, right? Like with no input required between those steps in order to propagate the advantages and get the foothold. So when we think about that, right, like those are system failures at 32 steps of depth. Automation is the only way that a human could hope to contend with that. So it goes down into the coding world as well. We have to think about the ability to, have the people who are responsible for committing code understand that they are part of an at scale and speed process, that there will be advantages of tools that will be contributed to the good side that will help do a lot of the good things in the hygienic aspects of coding. But we will see that the old development culture, as we've already seen, is eroding into something that looks more like, what is the power of your creativity, and can you suggest things to the system to create more, floral code? But at the same time, we need to make sure that the nuance of that coding is not lost and that the automation supports the ability for really nuanced code without giving up security in between those different layers.
Yeah, and it seems to me like there's an even a deeper challenge with this, in that so many people are beginning to use vibe coding or even AI assisted coding, even if they're not vibe coding. If they're good developers, they're using AI to assist their development process, which introduces potentially a different level of understanding, and therefore a new need for automation to be able to see that you've secured those things that you're now creating at a speed that exceeds what you were at before. Yeah, definitely an interesting moment in time that we're at. So with that in mind, if at all, how has this all changed the way that you advise organizations around security as you're getting interactions with clients?
Yeah, I mean, very basically, like, and we've been obviously, pretty impassionate about this forever, but the elimination of legacy vulnerabilities has never been more important, simply
Sure.
because those are the first layer of attack. Just the obvious, you could call it low-hanging fruit, but it really does come down to organizations we now exist on a 30, perhaps 40-year-old IT construct that has oftentimes sought the path of least resistance or lowest cost. It is oftentimes organically contrived or an amalgamation of many mergers and acquisitions in some cases. And because of that, we have always kind of had a philosophy in a lot of these places: just do what gets it to work, right? Legacy vulnerabilities just are. But accelerating the fundamental hygiene capacity is within reach, right? Like these tools, while Mythos does explore the darker side of these realities, we also have the ability to accelerate our capacity for understanding how to address these problems, right? And there are tools that both can do the assessment, the diagnoses of the environment, as well as some of that patch management, if you will, right? Like getting after legacy vulnerabilities as a marquee item, I think, is probably the most important takeaway here.
Awesome.
Yeah, a lot of the attack surfaces today, right, that are being, I'd say, accelerated and automated with AI, right? They're going against known vulnerabilities, right? So whether you're developing your code, having a secure container image to eliminate a lot of the baked in CVEs that are in the packages that are out of date, or pulling in all your application dependencies, having a very clean software bill of materials for how you're building your apps, or what most clients are, right? They're consuming product, right, from OEMs, and it's either two that you really can't control. So having a tool that can actually crawl your environment at the speed the attackers are doing to kind of help uncover what's exploitable is where would go a long way to help figure out where your gaps are in your strategy, right? So regardless if it's code you're writing or code you're consuming, right, having some way to audit your environment at speed and scale instead of having a human or two trying to do it manually, right? You just won't be able to keep up with the attack surface if you have hundreds, thousands of systems deployed.
And Michael, if you don't mind, just as a follow-on to what Nic just said, and perhaps I don't mean this to sound like a promotion, but like, it's really AI-powered continuous threat exposure management is like where we're at. The ability to, because we farm vulnerabilities of all sorts from our environment. There's application, there's container hardening, there's environmental scanning, you name it, right? Those all have to be normalized into a way that we can risk rank those decisions. Like when I say we have to go after legacy vulnerabilities, these could be many, hundreds of thousands, right? So prioritizing what we fix first really becomes the game. We don't have unlimited resources or at scale speed ability to go after these problems. So this continuous threat exposure management, or CTEM, as the industry has kind of named it. We at Evolving Solutions call this evolved risk, and we have kind of a process for doing that, ingesting what those insight capabilities are, how to normalize that data, take that, feed it into a reporting system that makes it both legible to people outside security, as well as the security tooling for enrichment.
Yeah, I wanted to actually touch on something you just said for a minute. Make it visible to people who are outside of security. And I think I was actually talking to our marketing director earlier, and one of the things that she pointed out is that this whole AI mythos thing has risen to a much higher level inside of organizations than typically cyber threats are. You'll see a little spikes where, hey, somebody got hacked and they're on the front page of the Wall Street Journal or whatever else. That used to be the thing we were worried about. Now it's like we're having a conversation about an AI model that's, exposing vulnerabilities at, a CEO, CFO level. That feels like a very significant change as well, sort of a highlight on what's going on in the security, the cybersecurity part of an organization. Um, how are we helping clients manage that? That's they've got a new level of visibility. You called out this the capability to better understand the threatscape a little bit, which goes a long way towards being able to give them the ammunition they need to be able to go talk to the board or the CEO or whoever else. What are there other things that organizations should think about or that we can help organizations with as they navigate this sort of increased visibility?
Yeah. So very simply, the mythos is not a new threat. It is a named one, right? So we know now that there's this capability. Certainly when something from an organization as, front of mind as Anthropic,
Yep.
this critical comes to the market, it gets a lot of press. So people who typically don't keep their thumb on the pulse of what happens in security suddenly, like it was to some degree, it was zero trust. Like, hey, I heard in my golf game there's this thing called zero trust. I'm going to ask my CISO what we're doing about it. So mythos is that on steroids, right? So now we have this kind of potential kind of sky is falling, sentiment around what's happening here. What we do for our clients is, and we do have clients who have really a sane grasp on this. And one of the comments that I heard from a CISO recently of a healthcare organization we work with was, this doesn't change the fundamentals, right? Like, we still have to do what we can do for the things that we know based on our risk ranking we should do, right? So one, it's to help organizations that we support with messaging that doesn't speak in the security vernacular to their business units or to their IT business peers who perhaps don't understand the nuance of what Mythos provides, and saying, okay, let's calm things down and just kind of look at the facts of what this actually is. Well, it is obviously a pretty serious situation. It doesn't change the bill, it doesn't suddenly stipulate that the organization triples the speed at which it reacts. It has to become really efficient. So going after those efficiencies is really key. And that comes down to integration so that those automation capabilities really emerge from what exists today. Largely, organizations have not done a great job at integrating their tools beyond just correlating their logs, which really is an integration. It's just shared insight. We need to get organizations to see the power of the APIs that they have in their organization to make those combined greater than the sum of their parts value of their organizational security stack to operate in harmony. That's the message we've always kind of promoted. But today, the justification behind making sure that's supported with automation and constructing the plan to get that's where we can support them immediately with just have that plan somewhere in the argument.
Yeah, really like it. Anything to add to that, Nick?
I think just taking a lens at the agentic AI development, right? Like, a lot of companies are embracing that because you can go from zero to hero real quick, right? Like, they're very powerful tools, and just realizing, acknowledging the fact that while it produces a functional output, it may not be secure by design, right? Or secure out of the bat. A lot of the models tend to be biased towards a lot of older methodologies and dependencies. So the product that cranks out the first iteration really needs to go through some screening process to get it up to a security standard. Will that change once some of these models are more publicly accessible, right? Maybe, right? Maybe they'll be more secure by default. But today, the current outputs of a lot of the tools do need either a human review to say, is this what it intended it to do? And then additional security layers on top of those outputs just to say, is this secure enough to run in my organization or not?
Yeah, it feels like there's, it's always been there, but there's this growing synergy between governance for security and governance for development are starting to sort of get this tighter linkage together because there's a dependency that the guide rails for your development guidelines don't just enforce structure and language choice and all the other things that most development guidelines do, but also emphasize security in a different way than we've historically seen. So the good side of this, we've gone down a lot of negative territory. The good side of this is those same tools are available to defenders and available to software companies and others that are trying to help protect this space. What are you seeing? Maybe I'll start with you, Nic, in this space that is that interesting or that's sort of showing an acceleration to help on the positive side to sort of help address some of these challenges.
Yeah, there's a lot of toolage is getting AI-enabled features, right? Kind of across the IT stack, whether it's email or the SOC and their SIM, and trying to pull in those correlations quicker, right? So that the cyber teams can react quicker with more, I'd say, enriched data sets to make those decisions faster to kind of determine if there is an active threat going on or try to actually proactively block some of them here in flight. So there's certainly a lot of tools across the whole stack now that are more focused towards the defensive matter of the AI, either at the development level or at the kind of the runtime in your environment. So it's certainly worth exploring and adapting those, especially if there's some areas where you may not have a full team to support some of these nuanced features, right? Like I think AI is definitely helping the humans focus on the critical versus some of the mundane tasks that take forever, right? Like a lot of the threat investigations could take hours for a human to go through a couple cases. Well, AI can really carve that down to minutes so that the human can actually focus on the business value and risk versus trying to figure out, is this real or is this just noise?
Yeah, absolutely. Russ, thoughts on how things you're seeing on the sort of defender side around AI?
Yeah, so I don't mean to hit this again for the sake of belaboring it, but continuous threat exposure management, the CTEM concept. I mean, it's the fundamentals of one discovery, right? Like the scanning process, making sure you have a wide view of all your assets, maintaining a CMDB of some sort that tells you and gives you the ability to just kind of anchor your posture and knowing what that is and be able to query that. It's the validation side of understanding what's real inside your environment. And then the AI powered risk scoring of all of those things, right? Because you're talking about thousands and thousands of things that come through your environment. How do those get prioritized correctly? Business impact get described to the people who have to go and either provide resources to fix those or go do that fixing. And then it's the mobilization, right? Like the shift here is going from the assessment concept of I need point in time awareness to I have a system that tells me when anything starts to slip at any point, right? The continuous validation part of this cannot be emphasized enough because this is, this AI problem is like rust. It doesn't sleep, right? So it is constantly pressurizing the environment. We need to think about, like, leaders need to make the transition in their minds from the assessment concept to continuous validation. And where that becomes a challenge and where they have to make some decisions, there are some things that they can do where that mobilization, the automated remediation workflows are possible, but there are still places, and in many of them, where the human hand still has to go do that work. And understanding, as a leader today, you should understand what is in either pile, where your organization breaks down into either of those two concepts. That's really critical to understand what your lift is and your capability of actually heaving it.
Yeah, no, that's, I think it boils down to, as I've heard you guys, listen to you guys talk, and I'm going to go back to a quote that you throw out there, Russ. It's not a new problem, it's a named problem. It's like we've got all of the hygiene, the controls, the posture, the understanding of posture, the understanding of the threat landscape and attack surfaces it's not new. It's the speed at which we have to respond to it, the speed at which people are able to exploit it, that really has pivoted us to have to adapt some new processes, some new tools to be able to respond to that quickly. And I really love this concept that you laid out of I need to know what I can let automate. I need to know what pile needs to go to the humans, and that's going to vary on the organization. And being able to understand for yourself, both in terms of your own controls, in terms of your staff, in terms of your the tools you have from partners and other places to be able to make those choices that's a fantastic perspective, I think, that we can take away from this. I'm about to wrap us up. Any last thing you might throw out there? Anything from you, Nic, before we wrap up?
I think like the whole AI era is like exciting as probably the sliced bread era, right? Like there's a lot of cool things to come, right? I think there's a lot of positivity in the space, so I'm kind of excited where where the defenses are gonna kind of expand in the years and months to come, right? So I think it's a market that is changing rapidly, as you hear it in the news, right? So I think keeping abreast to the changes in here is important to keep it on tabs of the defenses for your company, right? Because it does change quite quickly here.
Yeah, for sure. Russ, I'll let you wrap up with any last thoughts.
Yeah, if you're a leader on this call or hearing this, remember that we are emerging from a compliance-driven age where it was more likely that your failures would get you yelled at than get you breached. And while we are going into a risk-driven world, Mythos represents an absolute around the ability to have those things that would normally just be sort of a social failure in compliance to a risk-driven world where it is a mathematically certain model for being able to find those problems exposed appropriately. So thinking from, am I translating my world from compliance-driven to risk-driven and building a model that helps me understand how to view that, how to communicate that to the business? That's where I would go.
No, I love that. I mean, that really also encapsulates that we're going from a place where we always used to sort of anecdotally say, it's not if it's when. Well, now the when is now. You know, there is no sort of waiting for when that's going to happen. So, thank you guys both for joining today. I think this was a great conversation. I learned a bunch. I really appreciate your insight and your expertise and your willingness to share with our clients and those attending today. Thanks to everybody who attended the call today. I appreciate your time. We will be sending you a Yeti thermos and your Starbucks gift card, but why stop there? Why not get another pound of coffee or some Monster Java Monster? Java Monster? Am I saying that right?
It's I got the mean bean, yeah, but
a mean bean. I get the mean bean or some Rise mushroom coffee. Reach out to me, to the folks on the team, to Enjoy Evolving Us All, to your account executive. If you're already working with Evolving Solutions, get a conversation set up, and worth more than all the coffee and anything else is the insight this team, I think, can give you in some very unique and very challenging times. So thank you again, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you at a future coffee talk.
Thank you.